Aladin. It's been a while. We've been trying to set this up for like 3 weeks, I think, like a month almost. We had 2 situations get canceled.
Yeah.
But I've been looking forward to this. Like when you reached out, I was already very, very interested in what you do, because it's something that I've always been curious about, how the industry works over there, whether it's the movie industry or documentaries, news, things like that. And obviously, I'm also kind of involved in it in some way, shape, or form in media. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Okay, so like, you want to just start from the beginning? When somebody asks you, when you meet them in a social setting, what do you do? How do you describe what you do?
Okay, that's actually something I'm still working on. Like, what's my pitch?
Do you feel sometimes like I guess a little bit restricted, or like, you know, in terms of creativity and ideas and things like that?
Well, I mean, obviously,
as much as you can say without
but,
getting in trouble.
Obviously, there are regulation in China. I mean, everyone knows this. But I think like there is also just even before this, like there was, I remember, so to give you an example, like when I was at CGTN, like I pitched a couple of stories. So we had like this program, which is like really easy. Sorry. Which is like I start up my dream. So the idea is that you would go interview Francophone people in China who are like making a business, and that's really kind of a zhongnangliang, as they call it, like positive stories, and you know, just show like people doing a lot of business. And I was pitching, I was going on various WeChat group, I was interviewing people and stuff like that, and then I came and this is when I realized, I didn't know it back then, but this is when I realized that there are a lot of African people who are in China doing a lot of big business with factories and import, export, stuff like that. So I pitched it to my boss, to my manager, and she's like, yeah, okay, but you know, like we prefer to put forward like China technology and you know, we don't want to showcase so much that you know, we have factories in China. And I was kind of a bit baffled, because I thought, yeah, sure, maybe you have some, and then you realize that the people working in tech are all like white middle-aged men. There's not a lot of women, and there's not a lot of people of colors. And you're kind of thinking, because I've met some of those people, and sometimes you think, but I think the people doing import-export, they move much more money than the people working in tech or trying to, you know, do product. Sure. And also maybe the people doing import-export, maybe they have just a better impact on many people's life. I don't see why this is not a topic, but she was like, no, we prefer to focus on the tech. Like, okay, so then I tried to find people working in tech, and then I found this one guy from Switzerland who works in Hangzhou. And I pitched her again, and she's like, oh no, but this guy, the problem is that we interviewed him 3 years ago. And you're like, but 3 years have passed. Considering China's speed, maybe he has like new story to tell. And it's not like you have thousands of Francophone people working in tech in China. You know, at some point, like you just have a certain amount of people like this. So, you know, I think it shows like how, so yes, we have regulation, but then there is kind of this whole culture of, we just have a mandate to fulfill, and we don't have to take risk, and we don't have to, you know, kind of overwork actually. So I think that's like another thing that no one knows really much about, but this is also why you don't see a lot of interesting, you know, news segment or documentary coming out from CCTV and so on, because yeah, it's just the way that people don't have to have, they have KPI, but those KPI are just how many people can retweet your tweet, and that's it. It's not like how many people are actually watching your stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the first story that you mentioned in terms of like the restriction of like, oh, we want to show this image. You know what I mean? We don't want to put this other image out there into the world. And I think that you know, China's pretty good at that. They've been doing that, but I think maybe in the last 2 years with COVID and everything like that, that's been a little bit more difficult to manage, and the trade wars and everything. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I also felt it when I was still there, living there, is that there was definitely a focus of shifting the narrative of where the manufacturing capital of the world to where a tech capital as well. You know, I'm not sure in terms of the numbers. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that manufacturing is still the number one industry. You know, maybe number one industry next to like tech, and then real estate. But even real estate is not in a good place right now. So, but yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So then the second question I had was about what was it, like I lost my place there.
But then I think you can receive the same thing regarding documentary. So it's basically the same issue, which is like if you are in a private company, sorry, coming again, regarding documentary. So you could see the same thing. Like if you are CCTV, basically you have a mandate to put that much amount of content regarding history, nature, travel, stuff like that. So then you contact people, producer in China, and you're like, I want to have my 5-part series about traveling in wherever. But then the quality of the work won't be that important, because I mean, it's a bit important, because if your numbers are way too low, then your program will get cut off. Like a friend of mine, this is what happened to her. She was working in a small show on CCTV7, and at some point the numbers were so low that they decided to just cut it off. But I mean, at the end of the day, they don't have to care that much. But if you're a private company, like if you're Yoku, Bilibili, then this is more important, because you're an online platform and you rely on people's buying membership. And for that, this is where all the best TV shows now are all coming from the online platform, or like this documentary, because this is then you have like proper producer and proper creators who are thinking, okay, how do I get as much eyeball as possible so that we get enough people to watch the ads or to make the sponsor happy, so that we can move on to create a new season or create a new product. So I think like this is kind of where, let's say, Western creativity in terms of production and China comes and meet again. It's when you have like the private company who want to make their own project, and because this is important for them. Like they need to have as much people as possible watching what they produced. But people at CCTV, they don't care as much.
That was good. But so I guess the other question that I had was, do you think Last Train Home?
Can we make Last Train Home again? Well, fun fact, I didn't work on that project, but Last Train Home as a follow-up, it's not Lee Sin who directed it, but they have a 5-part series now, this being broadcasted on iQIYI. But I think first of all, like China, because that film was shot between 2006 and 2008, if I recall, you know, like China back then and China today is just completely different. I mean, come on. It's just the way things have completely changed. So
yeah, for sure.
In the sense of, you can't shut that store anymore. After, yes, it is harder now for creators, like, you know, to just like, okay, let me retract. Now also the rules have slightly changed. So back then, when you were like Zhang Yimou, famous Chinese director, and you were in the 80s, and France, actually, like the French Minister of Foreign Affairs was basically helping him shooting some of his movie. So back then, like he could go all around the film festival in the world, and China, let's say, didn't have enough like clout to say, you know what, Zhang Yimou, Mr. Zhang Yimou, you can't go out, you know, showing your movies about like cultural revolution. That's not really cool for us. So not possible. They could not do that. Basically, they didn't have the clout. But today, China is like such a powerhouse that yes, now in order to show your movie abroad, you need to have like a what we call a dragon stamp. And the rules, and it's all official, is that if you want your movie to be shown in foreign festival, you need to have that dragon stamp. So you need to follow the local regulation of creativity. That doesn't mean, I mean, you still have good movies. Like there is one, if I recall, the name is When the Dust Settle, and it's like a movie, indie movie, which is about this man who gets to get married, and if you read between the lines, you understand what's going to happen at the end of the story. And then he went to the Berlin Film Festival. So you still have people like, I think if you're like crafty enough and artisty enough, and if you fight enough, like you can still make good stories in China. But yes, for sure, things like you could not maybe do Last Train Home because first, China has changed, but also there is another part to it. Like I think people in China now are a little bit more proud of, you know, the achievement of the country. And I can understand that you would kind of be tired of always having those movie portraying China as like a poor and backward place. And I think they would kind of be not ashamed, but kind of another movie that country in such a way. I mean, I'm sure like if you're from Africa and you show again like savannah and lions and you know, but maybe now they are like you know, other stuff happening, or when people come to Paris and they shoot the town in such a touristy way, at some point you're like, okay, but Paris is not also that
just that. There's more to it. Yeah.
And also, I think social media played a role. Is that now you have any clip of anyone, just like a couple of days ago, Angela Baby, like one of famous Chinese star, like she was caught up smoking in a private party. And, you know, like suddenly it becomes like a national debate about if she can smoke. And I mean, I personally think like sometimes social media really push out their debate that maybe should not be there. But, you know, that's the way we live in now.
I was just thinking that like with the Last Train Home debate situation, it would be more about creating a documentary where you have access to things that might not show China in the best light. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm curious about this dragon stamp situation. So how does that work exactly?
So how does that work? So for every single piece of content you want to put in the cinema, and that's funny because okay, no, that's technical. Sorry. So for every piece of content you want to put in the cinema, so you will just go to your local regulators and you will show them the script when it's fiction film. When it's documentary, I'm not sure, but at the end of the day, you will show them like the final product, and then they will tell you if anything can be put out there. So for those who will cry to censorship, because there is also something else different in China, and I don't know how many countries are like this in the world, but in China, every movie is supposedly be able to be watched by every single people. So that means that even a 3-year-old kid should be able to watch your movie. So you can, we don't have like there is no classification
rating system.
There is no rating system between, you know, like all public, PG-13, PG-16, or only adults. Well, pornography is fully forbidden in China, like in Korea and Japan, for a reminder. But that means that if every movie has to be seen by every single people in the population, then obviously you're going to have to tone down every single thing because you can't have like a rating. What's funny enough is that if you look at application of movie ticket, you can still see there are like a lot of really bad horror movies in China, but they're all being showed at 11 p.m. So there are like people who try to find a way sketchy to, you know, try to grab a bug the way they can. So yeah, so the dragon stamp would mean that you just need to be like for every single audience.
About the movies, how much insight do you have into foreign movies in China? Because like I was gonna say, I was gonna ask about like, I know there's a quota in terms of the amount of foreign films that can be shown versus local films, and then there's different versions of movies for a lot of these big budget movies. Also, I noticed when I was still there and I was watching movies in cinema, sometimes I would watch a movie and I'm like, I feel like they added this section where the character goes to China and all these things just to allow themselves to be able to sell the film in China. You know what I mean? So, do you have any insight or any thoughts about that?
Sure. So first of all, now movie situation is really bad in China because you have like all those local lockdown happening from there and there. So it's becoming incredibly more difficult for China to, for the people running film theater. Another part is that I forgot if it's still the same, but at some point, like thanks to COVID, but China was like the biggest film market in the world. That was at least in early 2021, if I recall correctly. But now because of the whole pandemic situation, like when you have the whole Shanghai population cannot go to movies for 2 months, and maybe they can't still even go to movies because it's closed space. So of course that basically kills the market. But yes, so in China, officially only 34 movies can be imported. That's part of the quota system, as we call it. There is a way around it. The last movie I remember, for example, is The Green Book. That's a co-production between the American company and Tencent. So that's how this movie is not counted as a quota. So that means that many movies were trying to find like Chinese money so that it would become like a Chinese-American co-production so that it could enter China. Since the trade war, this is not the case anymore. Like, no one in their right mind would want to do a co-production with the US when the country is, still running the trade war. That is not in the time. I mean, this is not the way things happen. Yes, sometimes you do have, small added scene or specific scene that basically cater to the Chinese audience. Like I remember The Martian with Matt Damon, like when they try to save him from Mars, and basically they're like, oh, we're gonna kill those Chinese scientists. I think it kind of backfire in a way because then people in the audience, or then there was the other one, there was another one regarding like a giant shark eating people.
Is that the dude from the Fast 5 series and stuff like that?
Yeah. But basically like what was funny.
The Meg.
Yeah, the Meg. So when the Meg goes to Hainan Highland and tries to, terrorize people, but he doesn't eat anyone. And so people in the audience on Weibo were kind of laughing at it, saying like it's a shark movie, but they are not eating anyone in China, but they are eating people in the US, because I think I didn't see the movie, but they were making fun of it. And so I think like at some point people are not stupid. They're like, okay, we see it. You're just pampering us so that, you would want to go to see movies. But
there was another movie, King Kong, Skull Island. And there was a famous Chinese actress in that movie. And she basically didn't speak for most of the movie. She was around, but it's clear, like, she can't speak English. So there was just one scene at the end of the movie where there's a romantic scene with her and one of the main characters. And it just didn't make sense. Like, it didn't make sense at all. It was just a moment for her to be on screen and have a little romance and speak English, and and that was one of those situations that kind of took me out of the movie as well, where I know what's going on here, so
I would think that really the audiences are getting because on the side, like one of my side gig is I'm doing a podcast about China cultural industry, and recently I've put up a topic about like TV series. And back then TV series in China would be, and once again we're coming back to the private versus public sector in creation in China. Like a few years ago, like if you watch any Chinese TV series, there would be like 50 episodes of each 50 minutes. I mean, this is like way, way too long. And I remember watching the series like Do Hao, which is that kind of struck a chord with a lot of young women in China. And within 15 episodes, you would basically sense, okay, the story has come to an end, or the first season has come to an end. But then they would slap up more episode after this. So that was kind of weird. But I was talking to this producer and this writer, and they were basically saying now, because the market is getting people are still watching movies from abroad. Like if you go on Douban, which is like the Chinese IMDb, if you go on Douban, like the latest, coolest movie from abroad, people know it instantly which one they're supposed to download, because they're going to download it because those are PG 13, 16. But so the audience, at least the young urbanites in Shanghai, Beijing, the tier 1 cities, I think they know what's good content. And so therefore the private sector in China now, when they make series, they tend to have more like a European or American format. They're reducing the number of episodes from 50 to 20 or even 15. So that means that I think the audience, they are just learning. I wouldn't call it a silent revolution, but people know what is good content and they're watching it no matter what. And, the word is spreading out. I remember, sometimes I travel and I always try to get people's WeChat that are never in my world. Like, the taxi driver or the one guy selling stuff on one of the tower of the Great Wall. Some tower in the Great Wall, they have like small shops and, you have like local peasants. So I always try to get people WeChat, and I realized, I remember meeting this girl from Jinan, and she was just like a clerk in a company. And I added her WeChat and we talked, but she's like a huge fan of Billie Eilish,
Billie Eilish, yeah.
Billie Eilish, sorry for mispronouncing her name. But she's like 20 plus something. She's never left her town, but she still managed to love this artist. So I think like there is really, it's not so much on the radar of, international media, because that's not a super sexy topic, but that's my gut feeling that people here, they watch cool stuff and the word is spreading. Maybe it's not super important, but it's not like people are watching tons. Everyone is making fun of all the patriotic movie that they forcibly put up in cinema.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's really interesting, actually. So the generation is kind of changing and consuming more and more foreign content, and then sort of trying to replicate that in China as well, right?
I don't have metrics to prove it. It's only my gut feeling, as the overconfident white dude here in Beijing. But yeah, I do sense that. If you want to watch the metrics, you just go to you just go to Douban. You check what are the latest movie that got the best ratings, and then you will see that there is a few foreign movie that got good ones. So then you can have a sense of what people are doing, are watching.
Yeah, I could see that happening, because like on our side of things with my business and everything, I noticed that there's been some generational shifts with my hires, right? So like, for example, like I said, I turned 30 this year. My oldest employee currently, Chinese employee, is about 26. She complains about the 22-year-olds and 21-year-olds, 23-year-olds that we've hired to work for us. She's like, well, they don't listen. They need me to explain. They ask too many questions. So her generation is more close to, even though she's still a millennial, her generation is more close to like the traditional Chinese, where it's like, okay, your boss told you to do something, you do it. You know what I mean? And then with the people that she's managing, she's having to explain and convince them to do something rather than just telling them to do it. And what I explained to her was like, yeah, it's a generational shift. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to explain. You have to explain to them why they have to do this particular thing that might be annoying to do or might be tedious. So, I also don't have any metrics around this, but like, I'm just seeing it within my own business as well. Yeah. So where do you see the industry going in general, just as an overall topic?
That's the $1 million question. I keep asking it to the people around me. So I run this podcast called Middle Earth, which is focused on China cultural industry. I didn't talk about this, but in your question regarding how did I overcome my issues, to find gigs and meet people and be more out there. One of my tricks is that I started this podcast about China cultural industry, and I went out just, asking people questions and bringing them on to talk about their project. Like I was interviewing producer, people running galleries or, YouTuber or things like that, all focused on the Chinese market. And that's always my ending question, like you, like to to the guest when we talk about like the TV series, or recently I've talked to people doing contemporary art, or even like people doing motorcycle, because I was interested to know more about the biker culture. And wherever I go, I mean, the dark side, the down point is that, yeah, more regulation are still there, and like I think this is not going to be easier to make content in China. Like you have like to follow a certain type of stories. People will still find a way to to entertain themselves in a different way if they want. But at the same time, I think the market in China just keeps growing. Yesterday, I was talking to this woman who she works in a company, and then company is selling contemporary art through a WeChat application. And then when I was asking her like, how do you see the future? She was like, it's going to be okay. Like, yes, you can't do a piece of art that is like that has too much political or sexual connotation. But, people here, they want to buy art. They want to, enjoy life. So she was thinking the market is just going to keep growing for our company. Like we're going to sell more and more art on WeChat. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting paradigm, like, because on one hand, I think like, we can see like the way China acts in terms of, politically being stronger on the international scene day by day. But then at the same time, the local population, they just want to have a good time. And now they know more and more. And I think it goes all across product. Like I remember talking to this guy who was selling craft beer, like really basic stuff. But for me, it's like people here, they know what's good quality. Before 10 years ago, we thought no one would drink coffee, but now everyone is drinking coffee because people like the quality of things. And I think it goes all across borders and nationality.
They get educated over time, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. But to be honest with you, also at the same time, I think that's kind of the one thing we try with Listen, for example, to tell stories about China that can go abroad. But the problem is that it's really hard, I think, because you have like so many canon to follow here in terms of cultural product, that if you want to show it abroad, then it becomes like kind of too patriotic or just too old style, the way people make decisions. Because most of the people, like in any country, I mean, France has like a strong help subsidies system, but who are the people deciding who gets the subsidies to make your movie? It's either the professional of the TV channel, or those are special commission that are run by your peer and industry professional. But in China, you still have like a strong government. So the people of the culture bureau are, Lingdao in their 50s, and those people are not artists. They are, administration people. So that's why the people who make decisions sometimes for a project it's not even about censorship now, it's just about like personal taste. So of course, like a 50-year-old man who loves traditional culture will think that a certain type of movie or documentary to represent China is maybe not the same way as the young people of China would think it should be.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. I mean, I feel like that's across the board in a lot of different industries, like you said, where it's older people making decisions for younger people. Like, this is what we think is better for you. Whereas like, the younger people want to consume a different form of media. So just moving into the closing questions, I could probably talk to you for 2 hours, to be honest. But like, I was going to ask like, what have you found to be the most beneficial skills for you in your industry?
I think I kind of already answered that, but just to repeat quickly, really like to talk to people. I think that's the key thing.
It's like 80-20 principles, same thing, like 20% that brings you I asked earlier as well. Yep.
Yeah. I realize now, if I retrace back all the time I got a job, it's because I met someone at a party and then they told me, I mean, the way I met Listen, I met Listen because I met his producer in a party. And one day that producer, Yuan, she calls me up and she's like, oh, Aladin, do you know anyone who can write proposal in English? And I'm like, well, me, you could hire me, and this is what happened. So if I did not matter in the party, they would have never know who I am. They would have never called me up, and they might have found someone else. So I think, yeah, it's all about, you still have to deliver, you still have to make a good job at what you do. But if you are out there, and I realized, because years ago when I was struggling to find side gig, it's because when you have nothing to start with, it's really, really hard. But as soon I kind of realized, I'm not a billionaire by any point, but I really see that now projects are slowly coming more out to me and more than me chasing them. So I think that's thanks to, going out there, meeting people. Maybe I don't do this enough, but maybe post more stuff on LinkedIn and WeChat moments. Sometimes I feel I have nothing to share, so I don't want to do it. But I feel one important skill, maybe that's something I should learn.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you have multiple clips from different projects that you could post. Okay, what's one thing that you believe when you tell other people they think it's crazy?
Yeah, because I remember the question. I wrote an answer now. Remember it. So the one thing that so back a few years ago when I was kind of struggling, to find gigs or, do small, do stuff on my own. Basically, I started writing potential topic, and I pitched it to my manager, Steve Seidenberg, who is in the industry for over 40 years. And I pitched him several topics, and he picked up the one thing that I keep doing now, the podcast, the Middle Earth podcast, where I interview all those decision maker in the cultural industry in China. And I started doing this. And I think a lot of people at the beginning, funny, like cultural differences, like Westerners were more like, oh, that's cool, you do a podcast. And for years, I did it for free. Like that was my passion project. But a lot of people in China were like, why are you doing something for free? Because, you interview people, you do the research, you do the editing, then you post it for free. Like you don't make any money out of that. And I could sense that many people thought I was a bit stupid to do this. Like I should just focus on work, or I should focus on something that pays, or maybe even going to the gym. I don't know. I felt like many people were kind of baffled about, why are you doing this for free? Like you do it for free and you don't get paid for that. Like they didn't say, are you stupid? But I think I could sense it. And at the end, now I'm working with the magazine, The World of Chinese. Yeah, I always carry a copy with me, so that's one of my clients actually, and they contacted me because I had like a whole back catalog. I had like over 45 episodes of every type of topic, and they saw a value in it. And then now we're working, like we put up 2 episodes a month, and I have to admit that sometimes I thought maybe that's stupid to do something for free out there, but I think if you keep going at it, and trust me, I thought maybe I should stop at some point. But I think if you, do something that you like and you keep going at it, then at some point it will pay up. Just be patient. But as long as you have maybe one stream of revenue, your job, then find your passion project and try to, put it up until it becomes your main job.
I had to explain a lot to people in China, like why we have a podcast or even the YouTube channel and stuff like that.
Really?
So it's just like, yeah. I was selling him, it's a marketing tool, but I also just enjoy like interviewing people, making new connections. Like I'm learning from people, all this stuff. But yeah, I had the same sense of like people just looking at me like, what you're doing doesn't make sense. so yeah, I can relate to that feeling. All right, so 3 books, podcasts, or blogs that people could check out if they wanted to understand you better.
Sure. So I think the first TV series, it's a really old one, but I think if one day I could make a TV series like this, as someone who works in documentary, I would be really proud. It's called Generation Kill. So it's based on one article there was like, at the beginning of the second Iraqi war. So you had like all those journalists being embedded into like American units when they were invading Iraq. For the weapon of mass destruction that they never found. right? And so you have this TV series called Generation Kill, and it's only one season of 10 episodes, if I recall. And that's really like, it's fiction, but it's really based on a true story, in the sense that, you know, that's like a journalist who wrote the article, and then they based the whole TV series about that. And I think it's really a wonderful piece of fiction that, you know, brings you in places that sometimes a documentary cannot do, because you know, it's just like the quality of, sometimes fiction is maybe a better way to explain things that have happened in the past. Then if I would recall a podcast, I mean, I think like you guys are, you know, all about business and factories and sourcing the right people. So I think one podcast I would recommend is Planet Money from NPR. And it's basically like a lot of 20 minutes, 25 maximum, about like really basic economical situation. For example, they did something like breaking down the price of gasoline, or then they did a whole interesting story about people scanning people on Amazon with like sending free product. Or then there was like the story of a guy who created like a small who was selling his house, and then put like a computer doing like a mining blockchain in the basement when he was selling the house. I mean, they find like really interesting small stories, and I think for anyone who is into business, that's always kind of a nice breathe, you know, just to hear other stories of how other people are making a business. I think it's very interesting.
I'm a fan of that pod.
Yeah. I think everyone should. And I think the last book, and the last thing I would recommend, is a book called Fan Shen, a documentary of revolution in a Chinese village. So that book, actually, I was sent it to me by a friend. And, you know, everyone in China know Edgar Snow. Edgar Snow being this journalist that interviewed Mao Zedong in the late 30s, early 40s. And then he was like a good friend of China. A lot of people are laughing at him because he was he could have been manipulated, but that's not a topic. The book Fan Shen basically was written by this guy William Hinton. So he went to China when it was still the Republican government, and he was kind of an advisor for agricultural question. He was working there. Then when the communists took over, basically he felt compelled that they were also doing it for the right reason. So he kind of joined them, and then he was teaching in a college, like an agricultural thing to students. And then that's the moment when you have like the whole moment when the breakdown of old society, when they're basically like redistributing the earth and the land among like all those villages. And so you have the story of that village, which is like, I read it in the French version. I forgot the name of the village in English, but basically it's like you have like a deep explanation of Chinese society and how it's transformed. And when you compare it to today's China, it's just really amazing. And you realize, because, you know, we always hear about stuff like, oh, China has evolved so much above the last years and so on. But when you see where they were coming from and the way the society was working, like you had maybe in that village, you had 250 families, but 5 families were really rich and the rest were just working their ass off until they died. And they just could not, you know, they just had to pray that they would not feel sick, or, you know, that their house would be burned down for some random reason. So I think this book really like gives you the way China was at the end of the 40s, after World War II and the revolution. So of course, like things were not easy, but you kind of get a sense of where the country was coming for thousands of years. And when you compare it to today's China, like you see like the whole differences. I think that's really, I love that book.
It's also, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So if you guys are still listening, thank you again. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Aladin Faré. I'm sure we'll have a link in the description, or you can reach out to me on Twitter, the same name.
And is there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think we're cool. You know, and I think that's my own thing on my own podcast. Like I try to cut it. Before I was doing 60 minutes of interview, and now my managing editor, like the marketing guy, Dragos in the world of Chinese, he told me like, no, try to put it at 40 minutes. So always, I think when you pitch any story, try to be as concise as possible. So nothing to add.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, like we're doing like part one, part twos of these interviews and stuff. So it's like usually 30 minutes per episode. But
D'accord.
yeah, thank you for being on the podcast, Aladin. It's been fantastic. Like I said, we could have been talking for hours. I have more questions, more things that I want to ask you, but I'll let you go. And I really appreciate you coming on. So
And thank
cheers.
you for having me. Well, we can, have another part three, part four another day. And I will let Lissin know about, the Discord. And if one day you show it again, like I will send him the link, maybe he can join.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean the Discord people can join for free as well. So it's you just have to go to the website and check our services. And actually, there's a specific Discord link. So yeah, but yeah, we'll link up everything that you do, all of the things that you discussed here, and your podcast as well. Maybe I can jump on your podcast and discuss Chinese culture a little bit. But cheers, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you.